kids. Talk us through the positives and negatives of labeling your kids.
Yeah. There's no positives. No positives. It's all, as far as I can tell, all negative. Maybe you can come up with some positives. I can't. So whether you label them as you're unbelievable or you're terrible. So if you label a kid, let's say they're 11 years old and they're really good, and you say you're unbelievable, you're the best, you're incredible, you're going to be a superstar, you're basically setting your kid up for failure for a couple of reasons. First of all, it might be that they're not unbelievably talented. It might be that 11 years old, they're just bigger than everybody else. And when the other kids mature, then it evens out. So kids get mislabeled as talented when they're really just bigger. And so let's say they get to be 16 and all of a sudden everybody catches up to them physically. All of a sudden they're not superstars anymore. What does that make them? Failures. Like, what's wrong with you? You're going to be the best. Oh my gosh. It's a horrible thing to play. That's a horrible burden to place on kids. So labeling them as exceptional or talented in some ways is, first of all, it's unrealistic. And, sports leagues around the world spend multi-billions of dollars every year trying to identify the superstar. And clearly, the superstars, the Mbappes, the Messis, all these, they're obvious. But the ones who are going to be, stars, we are unbelievably bad at that. Because how somebody is at 14 or 11 or 16 is not necessarily predictive of how they're going to be at 22, 26, 28, unless maybe women's gymnastics and some other sports like that where there's clearly early maturation. But even then, it used to be that if you were over 20 in women's gymnastics, you were off the grid. But now you've got 27-year-old Simone Biles, who's the GOAT. And so even then, you're seeing that. Of course, you're seeing 13-year-old Olympic gold medalist skateboarders, which don't even get me started on that. But labeling them possibly, you can say it also, they can't control their talent. You're so talented. Well, who's responsible for that talent? Well, parents, because they give them good genes. Because as much as we like to think, especially in America, that if everybody works hard, they can be successful, they can be the best, it's not true. There's an old saying that you can't teach height. So you might have the best hook shot in the world, but if you're not 7 foot in the NBA or 6'6" for WNBA, you're not center in those leagues. Genes matter, but you can't control them. So talking about talent, it's a waste of time to talk about it, because it not only is it a waste of time, it's destructive. It's a waste of time because your kids can't do anything about it. They can get better, more skilled. They can't get more talented. And so if they don't make it, even if they worked unbelievably hard, it's the parents' fault because they didn't give them good enough genes. But of course, the parents are victims too, because they didn't give their parents didn't give them good enough genes. And I've seen in so many sports, you look at the superstars who make it. But what they don't realize that there were probably hundreds of thousands of kids who did the exact same thing. The hours, the miles, the balls, the shots, but they didn't make it because they didn't also have the talent. And so the positive labeling, forget about it. Negative labeling, just as bad. Because let's say you're 11 years old. It's like, oh, he's not going to make it. He's got no chance. You believe that. And I'm a perfect example of that. So my sport as a youth was alpine ski racing. Dave Riding is a very good Brit who is on the World Cup, has had a lot of success. And when I went to this boarding school in Vermont for ski racers, and I was 4'9", 89 pounds. Now, I don't know if you can translate that. Do you guys use pounds there, don't you? No?
No, some people will. They use stones and ounces, but I use kilos.
Okay, anyway, that's a very small 13-year-old kid. And I had basically the coaches, a couple years later when I, quote, made it, the coaches said, there's no way. You didn't have a chance. But my parents always said, my parents are fairly small people, and they said, you just keep working hard, you keep at it, you love it. And my coaches just said, look, do the best you can. And I did have one coach who saw something in me that I didn't see in me. And I just kept working hard, and I grew, and I'm not a beast by any means now, but I ended up competing at the international level. I was world ranked. Now, trust me, I wasn't close to the Olympics. I wasn't nearly that good, but I went way farther than anybody else did, even though I was labeled as not having any potential. And so that's bad too, because you never know. because a kid who's nowhere at 11 could be a superstar at 22. Classic Michael Jordan story. He didn't make his junior varsity basketball team. Now he's he's the GOAT of basketball. So labels, the only, okay, let me say it. The only label that can be positive are things over which kids have control. So let's say they had a really good competition. You didn't say, you won, man, you're the best. No. Say, you worked so hard to get that result. Or you were so focused during the competition. You were so there the whole time. I could see you were there. So, because what you're doing is you're not just saying, good job, or you did really well, you won, but you're reinforcing what enabled them to be successful. And if you're telling us like, oh, hard work, focus, intensity, passion, if you're sending those messages, then they go, oh, so what makes me successful is all those qualities. And well, the fact that I'm 6'9" and my dad is too, then I guess that helps too.
Yeah, I think of verbs and the actions and the doing actions of an athlete as being the things to promote, as well as their characteristics, like endearing characteristics that they want to emulate. But what about the negative labels that athletes have placed on them? Like you said, someone like Michael Jordan, who was labeled as not good enough and in his high school. That then is a fuel for their motivation to then potentially put in the work to prove that person wrong. You don't see it go the other way, right? I think the over positively labeled athlete that I don't think you see too many success stories come from that, because it leads to complacency, just thinking there's an assumption of success. The expectation is just not fulfilled. I don't know if that road is sort of fulfilled as much as the other, but the opposite, with hearing all of the stories of people being told they weren't good enough and then they do make it. I was actually in that bracket, I kind of think, as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you make a good point that it can be fuel, but I don't think it's really healthy fuel, the healthiest fuel. Because really what it says is like, I'm inadequate, but I'm going to prove to the world that I'm not. Instead of, I'm where I am, and I'm going to see how good I can be. So labeling somebody as using the fuel of like, oh, I'm going to prove to the world, that comes from a position of deficit. And is it fuel? Yes. Can it work? Yeah. Are there great stories that you hear all the time? For sure. But is it the best kind of fuel? No. It's still got some contamination, because it comes from a sense of inadequacy. And that's not a great place to start from. You just want to start from where you are. It's like, okay, I'm where I am, and but I have this dream, and I'm going to do everything I can to get there. Because when you're driven by those emotions, by those beliefs, those attitudes, that's the rocket fuel. That's going to propel you. Nothing's going to hold you back, because to not do that would be inauthentic.
If you've enjoyed that video, then you might enjoy the full unedited version of the episode. All you got to do is click right here. Go on. Go now. Go. Here.